Hey folks, I'm going to try to keep my little preamble here relatively short, but I just wanted to say a couple things first that I feel are important. If you're really raring to go, I'll put up an annotation that should jump you right to the beginning of the text of the fan fiction. But first, a couple weeks back, Azekahh had, as his Skype status, something along the lines of, I am quitting YouTube forever, I am serious this time, you guys, in all caps, aka the Royal Canterlot voice. But, of course, just yesterday, he posted some more fanfiction, hooray! So I guess then that it was all a joke, or that maybe he was just not feeling real good about the whole being pestered by thousands of people thing. But I don't imagine that he's particularly any more interested in reading the next chapter of Hands or continuing the Hands readings that he started, even though people kind of like are harassing him to or want him to. So I don't know, this might be like a relative monkey off his back. But I figured out that it's relatively easy to get set up to read fan fictions and so on. And I'm told my voices for the various characters, canonically, are not actually all that bad, which I don't know if I believe, but anyway, so that's what that is. I am willing and relatively able to continue reading chapters of Hands as long as it's sort of desired, if I'm getting relatively positive feedback about my quote-unquote talents. It's a little harder in the human world, obviously, because you don't have a magic symbol which appears for you when you figure it out. But yeah, we can just go until we're out of chapters, at which point you guys can go and harass the author to write more or whatever. Or just, I don't know, write the final chapter. I don't care. So I'm trying this, and then if it's good, if people think that it's worth anything, then that will be what goes down. So I guess without further ado, we'll just start the reading here and begin with Hands, Chapter 3, by Andrew Joshua Talon. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic fan fiction. Disclaimer, this is a non-profit fan-based work of prose. My Little Pony Friendship is Magic is the property of Hasbro and the reinvention of the lovely Lauren Faust. No copyright infringement is intended. Please support the official releases. Here we go. Hospitals are a bore. No matter what universe, what century, I don't care. A proper hospital is a boring one. And it's supposed to be that way to encourage you to get the hell out faster. The Talking Pony Hospital? No different. I'd requested some literature. Essentially the pony classics. I had tried reading modern novels on Earth, but aside from science fiction and mystery and the occasional political thriller, I didn't really have much interest in, current literature. I mean, after reading Catcher in the Rye, it's just sort of a million copycats. I was sick of the teenage and college-age disillusionment. I wasn't a woman, so I didn't have much interest in romance novels or women's literature. I wasn't really all that gay, so I didn't have a lot of interest there. Not a dieter or self-help neurotic. So my reading was chiefly to learn things, or expand my mind, or have fun. As for pony literature, well, I gave Equestrian Guide to Citizenship a try. Oh, wasn't too bad, though the author seemed a little off his rocker. I also read The Fall of Princess Luna, which was apparently out of circulation for a while. Tragic story. I couldn't imagine the horror Celestia felt when her sister fell to the dark side. History of the Penguin Wars was very interesting. It's kind of like a Tom Clancy novel, except with magic and evil penguins as the villains. The Stoke House was apparently the classic pony horror novel, with slavery as the central terror then, say, death, though having your mind torn from you, all control removed, is scary enough to any sapient life form. The Adventures of Daring Do were also pretty good as far as contemporary stuff went. Given the nature of their world, fantasy is basically everyday literature. Disaster novels, also relatively popular. The survival of every man, or rather every pony, in the incredible situation, something to enjoy, though I only got that from the nurse. What? Really, the differences were fairly minor otherwise. It might be a recurring theme with brain thinking, mammalian tool-using species. Brain thinking, hyphenated, I like. Okay. So, doing the egghead thing? Rainbow Dash asked. I looked up from my current book and stared at her as she hovered around. Dash shrugged. What? I brought my tortoise in for a checkup. I don't have anything to do until he's done, she said. I would have asked why she didn't take her tortoise to a vet, but the peculiarities of veterinarians versus real doctors were still a bit of a mystery to me. I mean, okay, I had been taken to a vet the first time I'd gotten injured on this planet, but I think it had more to do with distance than Twilight's opinion of me. Oh.
Anyway, you struck me as kind of an egghead,
Dash continued, rubbing her chin with the hoof.
All this talk of sciencey stuff like other planets, laws of physics, how I break them, that was pretty cool. How you translated all what I do into egghead language.
I found a lot of my long-forgotten math classes were actually coming back in the absence of, well, let's be honest, computers. Working for a living in an alien world and a bit of tutoring from Twilight had brought it all back to me, really. Doing the math for a sonic rainboom was a way to relieve the boredom and prove to Twilight that I wasn't just a dumb ape about the numbers. Not entirely.
But I guess lots of kinds of egghead stuff can be fun to different kinds of eggheads, Dash continued.
She rubbed the top of her head now.
So, you don't talk a lot about your world.
I stared at her in disbelief. I once again pointed to my jaw. She shrugged.
Well, yeah, okay, dumb question.
Irritated, I turned my eyes back to the book.
Anyway, I guess I was curious since you use the same variables and all that junk, like gravity. A G is a G, right? So I heard Twilight said there might be a way to boost my speed, and I was wondering if you could get her to work out the numbers and stuff, she said. She smiled.
I growled at her. Rainbow Dash grinned.
Didn't catch that. Thanks a bunch.
She flew off. I sighed and beat the book against my forehead. Section break. A long night's sleep improved my disposition considerably, and I asked for some books on mathematics, and a pen, and a paper, and an abacus. At least according to the book I learned mathematics from, most mathematicians were terrible at arithmetic. The key was in understanding how the numbers function and what you want them to do, i.e., stuff they don't exactly teach you in school. As a result, I had been rather forced to laboriously relearn mathematics, break my mind of bad habits. It's tough enough to learn in elementary school. It's even tougher when you're older. As a liberal arts major. Still, I had a functional grasp, though certainly nothing fancy, of the basics of advanced mathematics. Study lessons and weekly quizzes with Twilight certainly aided my growth on the subject. And now I was applying those lessons to the problem of how to get Rainbow Dash to go faster. Well, at a high enough speed, she wouldn't be able to propel herself, I thought to myself. I scribbled some notes. Maybe if there were a spell to increase the density of air around her wings. Good idea. The problem with that would be the added friction, of course, but considering she could take over 1,000 Gs without trouble, I was sure we could figure out a way around that. The door opened, and I looked up to see Twilight Sparkle enter with a smile.
Hello, Andrew, she said brightly. I wanted to check up on you, see how you were doing, and review some of the notes from a previous conversation we had.
I managed to nod with my whole upper body and pointed down at my notes. Twilight snatched up a few with her... a few of the notes. Twilight snatched up a few with her telekinesis and read through them. She nodded or shook her head every so often.
It might be possible to increase the density of the air around her wings as she goes faster. I'll have to run the calculations again,
Twilight said thoughtfully. I shrugged, and then looked at her questioningly as she cleared away my work. She smiled cheerfully.
Well, this was in regards to your species' evolution. A few parts of it. You had been studying, anthropology at your school on Earth, correct?
I managed again with my strange nod. Liberal arts, see?
Right,
Twilight said, rummaging around in her saddlebags for a few sketches I had made that day. She held them up.
And you included some parts about sexual selection.
Okay, guys, here we go. Nodding with my whole body was tiring, so I held up my hand like a sock puppet and let it nod for me.
Oh, that's creative.
Twilight blinked a few times, but then she got it and smiled.
Oh, good. Anyway,
she said, and she placed the sketches back in my lap along with a notepad, blank paper, and pencil.
I was wondering if you could establish a range of body styles, roughly speaking, from the least attractive to the most attractive, as well as some notes on what the males of your species look for in a mate, in general, and then you specifically. I stared at her, but she just shrugged. I'm doing sexual selection studies in Ponyville stallions, and a little study into other species selections, she smiled. That's why I wanted to get from you before. But I think, I maybe came on a little bit too strong.
Her smile was nervous, and she had a bit of a blush. That is an understatement, I thought dryly. Still, I waved her off anyway. I mean, we were both alien to one another, and frankly, explaining I was a little freaked out at the moment at romantic attraction to someone outside my species would probably require me to speak. Probably very quickly to avoid hurting her feelings too badly, if that was the case. If not, I needed to speak quickly to avoid embarrassing the both of us. I nodded with the hand puppet again and began some quick sketches. On the far left side of the piece of paper, I drew a basic body plan of a supermodel on meth. Skinny beyond belief, and despite their ornamental nature, most men were not really attracted to them. Okay. I don't understand. On the far right side of the piece of paper, I drew the kind of woman that I couldn't help think of as living boulders. When I was little, I pretended one of them would fall over and then roll after me like the Raiders of the Lost Ark. Obviously, these were the outliers, and men who found this body plan attractive were not a large percentage. Even in America. Ouch. I drew a scale of figures in between, marked the middle bit, running from the girl who's on the verge of working out too much to the girl who is generously called voluptuous, quote-unquote, as the average human male desire. I wrote down several general turn-ons for men, physical, non-physical. Hey, we have them too. Personally, I go for intelligent women, kind of maternal, or a little fiery. More often than not, I ended up dating crazy women. Though that was just a male bias talking, probably. When I was finished, I showed the sketches to Twilight. She nodded approvingly and smiled at me.
Good. How about what human women want?
I shrugged, but then I gave it my best shot, running purely from female instinct. Oh, where does it come from? Okay. I wrote the majority of females of human species prefer tall men, athletic build. Emotionally, women in general wanted more sensitive men when it came to long-term stuff like child-rearing, but preferred a balance between manliness and sensitivity. Of course. Being personally attractive and super confident, but a jerk, an alpha, in other words, worked for women only who wanted short-term relationships. Longer term, they wanted guys who would stick it out with them, but the more successful relationships were the ones where the men maintained their personal attractiveness and confidence throughout as best they could. Okay, I was a little vague, but let's be honest. With the social sciences, you're always going to be a bit of a generalist. And I'm a man to boot who is dumbing down human male-female interactions for a talking magic pony, so give me a break.
In a lot of ways, it's not too different from our own species.
Twilight mused as she read it over.
Still, it'll put some ideas that, certain ponies have been having to rest.
I stared at her. She coughed and looked aside.
Oh my! Look at the time. I think I need to...
She gasped as I took a hold of her tail. I glared at her.
Could you let go of me, please?
She asked. I waved my hand around for her to explain while still holding onto her tail. She sighed and trotted back to the side of the bed, getting the message.
Okay, there are a few ponies in the village who think you're,
Twilight shrugged.
A gelding.
I stared at her in disbelief. Twilight spoke quickly.
Well, I mean, ponies having relationships outside their species isn't unheard of. Actually, it's fairly common. No pony really thinks it's all that weird. Not here in Ponyville, anyway. I mean, you've seen Spike, right? He's attracted to Rarity, and he's a dragon. It's not the first time at all. And you haven't shown any sign that you're even attracted despite all that's going on, so... She gave a nervous smile. So, well...
I let go of her tail and sighed heavily. Ugh.
I mean, if this is a bad thing, I can certainly help alleviate it. For scientific purposes, that is.
Twilight said quickly. I stared at her in shock. She backtracked, also quickly.
Now, I mean, we don't have to do anything, but, you know, pretending attraction, makes ponies think of us as, well, maybe a little more normal, relatively speaking, she said. I mean, unless you are attracted to us and you're just resisting it.
I leaned back on the bed. I took hold of my pillow and placed it over my face.
Okay. I guess we'll just talk about this later then,
Twilight stated. I groaned.
I'll take that as a yes. Goodbye. Get better soon.
With that, she trotted out. I groaned again, wondering how the hell I was going to explain any of this.